So thank you very much for joining us. This is our May roadmap update. Steve Millidge, Payara CEO, he's going to be talking about the roadmap for the rest of the year, a bit of a recap of what we've done, an update on the Jakarta EE 9.1 approach, as well as sort of the results from the Payara Platform 2021 survey, a bit of an update on Payara Cloud, and we'll have some time for discussion and questions as always. So please do let us know if you've got any questions, put it in the chat or put it in the questions section, and I will try and address it when I can. Otherwise, we'll have it at the end of the presentation. So thank you guys very much for joining us. Steve?
Hi, thanks for coming. Thanks for your time. As Jaden says, I'm going to talk through the Payara roadmap. We'll be, as he said, we'll be looking through the survey. I'll have a look on the 2021 roadmap, basic recap, what we said last February and what progress we've done on that. I'll talk a little bit about Jakarta E9 and the Payara approach to supporting Jakarta E9 9.1. Because we have an update on where we are on that. And then I'll look at what's coming on the road to 6, and these things will come in community as we get towards releasing 6 sometime in next year. And then, as Jaden said, we've got time for discussion. Quite a bit of the time will be scheduled for that. If you've got any questions, put them in the chat. Jaden will pick them out and ask me, and we can reply to those. So let's just dive straight in. We've also got an announcement, which you may have seen. It's not a techie announcement, but it's big for the business. We are a UK business. Our head office is in the UK, and we've been awarded what is a very prestigious award in the UK, which is called the Queen's Award. So this is a very independent award set by the Prime Minister, agreed by the Queen, and it's for basically elite companies in the UK. So we were very proud to win that. The whole team won it for what's called international trade, because fundamentally Payara is essentially a global company. We started right at the beginning as a global company. We have customers all over the world. We have Payarans all over the world as well, and we are growing quite quickly. So we were very proud to get this award. It means I get to, or one of the team gets to go to Buckingham Palace, have a reception, and probably not meet the Queen herself, but we'll meet some representative from the royal family.
Who's going, Steve? Is it you?
I don't know who's going, to be honest. So we don't know if it's, typically, it's maybe because of COVID, it might get cancelled, but that would be unfortunate. But I think we maybe get 1 or 2 slots. So that'll be a good day out. We also get one of the Queen's representatives come to our office and presents us with a trophy.
Yeah, the Commander Lieutenant.
Something like that, yeah. So that's very good. I mean, basically what it shows, though, I think for others out there, is that we are a global company and we are sort of making mark and we are growing. And as part of that, we're actually also hiring. So if you want to get involved in Jakarta EE, then come and speak to our team. That was just a little segue. And I'll go straight into the survey as well after that. So every year we do a survey and find out, how people use Payara, what they think about Payara. We also put in ideas for features, some of which are on the roadmap, some of which are more speculative, and get people to vote on that. The survey this time had close to 100 respondents, so that was good. We always want more information. I head up in Payara the sort of product side, so the product management. So I'm always super keen to find out what people want. It's actually incredibly difficult to find out what you guys out there want us to build. And the more information we have, the better. So this is part of our approach to finding out and building the products that you want. We use this survey. So I'm going to just pick a few highlights of it. I'm not going to go through the whole thing. I'm not sure, Jaden, whether you guys publishing the results out there at some point to people who've filled it in total, but these are the bits that were interesting. So first one is basically Jakarta EE, about the same equal number of people sort of admitted that they were using Jakarta E8, if you like, as opposed to Java EE8, which is good because that sort of shows that the namespace change, the name change is starting to register. It's very, when you're heavily involved in Jakarta EE and all the committees and all that sort of thing, it's easy to forget that out there in the real world, this stuff may take a long time to actually percolate into people's priority lists. So it was good to see that half of respondents, or 40% anyway, responded that they were using Jakarta E8, 39% using Java E8. So sorry, 35% EE8, Jakarta EE8. So that's good because when effectively Jakarta EE and Java EE8 are both the same thing. Just one of them is released from the Eclipse Foundation and one of them was released by Oracle. But binary, APIs, they're all the same. But it's good to see that move. Then we had an area on the survey where we looked at, basically we speculate on features and we ask people whether they would use that feature. And these are some of the features that we talked about, and these are some of the results. So, and some of these are actually on our roadmap, some of them aren't, and some of them will probably think about producing and creating quicker than we would have before. So they're all ideas that we put out there, and we asked people to decide whether they would use the feature or not, or maybe. Interestingly, the infrastructure as a code came out as the top. This is basically providing a Java API to ASAdmin. That's how it was described. So ASAdmin currently is obviously script. You can script Payara installations using the ASAdmin CLI. For those that don't know, ASAdmin actually sits and talks to a REST interface on the admin server. So the idea of this feature was to create a Java API that talked directly to the REST interface, so you could build out infrastructure as a code. So that actually jumped way in priority in this sort of voting than we'd imagined. So that's something we need to look at going forward. Another one was Grafana dashboards. We don't provide these at the moment, and these were out-of-the-box dashboards that we could provide to people for them to use. That would show sort of key metrics within Payara, sessions, memory, those sort of things. All that data is there now, but it's just to provide a standalone, out-of-the-box dashboard. So again, that's something we think we probably could quickly do. We need to take it into the product management space, look at the priorities, and start factoring that in. Because again, that was something we speculatively put in there. I'm not going to go through all of these now because some of these things we'll cover later, and some of the things that we've delivered. But the highest ones were basically these ones here. So we've got platform modularity, which is just splitting up, and that will splitting up the server into the different APIs and API support. And some of that will need to go back into Jakarta EE committees to look at how we do that within the platform itself. Domain upgrade I'll talk about. The one that I haven't got any slides for is the service mesh. So this is something that about half of people would find interesting. So again, that's something that we can look at. It's currently not on high priority on our roadmap, but again, maybe we'll move that up. The other ones I'll talk about in slides anyway, because they're sort of in process of implementation at the moment, so they're coming. So let's recap on the roadmap that we presented in February. I think it's February time. So first, I want to just reiterate the benefits of Jakarta EE and the Jakarta EE model. This is key because this is how Payara see our platform evolving. So one of the biggest things about Jakarta EE compared to, say, other APIs for building server-side applications is that Jakarta EE separates your application from the APIs like Jakarta EE and MicroProfile, and then from the runtime, which is what Payara provides. So the runtime itself provides lots of support for sort of core capabilities, as we've seen on here. Networking, HTTP, threading, messaging, data sources, security, all those sort of infrastructure tasks. Jakarta EE provides APIs, and MicroProfile provides APIs to manage those things, and then you spend your time concentrating on the application. And the other thing that the runtime does, like Payara, is we sort of then run on compute infrastructure. Traditionally, obviously, that would just be a bare metal computer straight on the operating system. But over the past few years, that's evolved into containerization, virtualization, Kubernetes, Fargate, all those sort of different compute infrastructures that now exist. But the great thing about Jakarta EE is that, as you say, you can concentrate on building your application, and the Payara team can concentrate on implementing the APIs and taking that compute infrastructure and allowing you to deploy your application where you want to deploy it. And that's our vision of where we're taking the platform. So what we're basically saying is that we want you as developers to basically concentrate on building your applications and not have to spend a whole massive time configuring infrastructure. Kubernetes, fantastic technology, but it is infrastructure at the end of the day. It's scheduling processes to run on a cluster of VMs or a cluster of physical hardware. At the end of the day, that's what it does. It manages the networking, it manages the scheduling, it manages security across a whole set of machines, whether they're virtual machines or physical machines. And to actually integrate your application into that infrastructure requires a lot of boilerplate work on building container images, writing YAML files, worrying about pods and secrets and all those sort of things. None of which has anything to do with building server-side applications. It really is infrastructure technology. So it's not writing any business code whatsoever. So we think Jakarta EE model fits perfectly into this world. From the days, back in the 90s when it was invented, the application was separate from the deployment of that application. And this is what we're building out in Payara. So our vision really is that to give you the technology to scale right through from IoT devices like Raspberry Pi, where we can use small runtimes like Payara Micro, and their job is to get smaller. And our job, is to make that smaller and faster and run better as a single instance, a single VM. Then we go through to Payara Server, which is obviously fundamental to Payara Server is the domain model, where we have administration servers and we have instances, managed instances. And we still think that model serves for those that don't want to go to full orchestration platforms like Kubernetes. And our job in Payara Server is to basically make sure that we can run that model across any of the infrastructure that you want to run it on. So that's including just sort of containers or normal machines, or through VMware virtualization, or on top of Kubernetes itself. And we'll talk about that in another slide. And then we have our new product, Payara Cloud, which will be coming out in the autumn. And Payara Cloud is taking a completely different view. This is actually going to be basically cloud and Kubernetes native. So it sits on top of Kubernetes, on top of a public cloud, and will allow you to take your application and run it on what is effectively a Jakarta EE PaaS, platform as a service. So basically our vision is to enable you to write the applications, but by providing API support for Jakarta EE and MicroProfile, and all the infrastructure that requires within the VM, and then allow you to choose where you deploy that application so that you can spend your time building good applications, which is essentially what you tend to get paid for. So from a roadmap perspective, there are a couple of things that I'm going to split it out into. The first is core standards. So these are the things that come outside of Payara. So these are the things that Jakarta EE committees and MicroProfile committee and JDK team, etc., are driving. And this is our standards timeline. So this is saying where we think we'll implement these things. So this is updated from February. So MicroProfile 4.0, which gives you the new MicroProfile APIs, that came out in February, and we support that now. That's out in the latest versions of Payara. Jakarta EE 9.1, that's coming, will be released in May, at the end of this month. Jakarta EE 9 is obviously was released around Christmas time, and we have support for running those applications. And I'll sort of give you an update on where we're going with that as well. But now, currently, you can take Jakarta EE 9 applications and run them on the Payara platform, Payara Platform 5. 9.1 is a small update which updates Jakarta EE 9 support to Java 11. Well, Payara's 5 is run on Java 11 for years now, so that's not a big deal for us. And then MicroProfile 4.1 will come out in June, has some changes around health checks and some other things. We'll support that very soon after it comes out. And the next big change will be JDK 17. So that's due to drop in September, and we hope to have JDK 17 support very close to its JDK 17's GA date, so general availability date. JDK 17 is an LTS version. As part of Payara, we aim really to support the LTS versions of Java rather than tracking every 6 months release. So we'll be supporting JDK 17 sometime after that release in September. Then the next big one will be MicroProfile 5, which will likely, but not definitely, update to Jakarta EE 9 as the base platform. And then we're looking to aim to target what we will be calling Payara 6 to align with whenever Jakarta EE 10 comes out. So Jakarta EE 10 is due sometime end of the year. That hasn't been decided at all yet, what dates. Interestingly, for Jakarta EE 10, it's starting to move forward, and there's a lot of what we call release reviews kicked off, which talk about what capabilities and what new features that Jakarta EE will get. So I encourage you to go onto the jakarta.ee website, have a look, and get involved, because we're now starting to define, and move forward the Jakarta EE platform. It's been a long time coming, but now it is starting to move quite quick. So we're hoping to track that, and we'll be building sort of, as it evolves, we'll probably push out alphas and things that have the new EE 10 capabilities during the progress of EE 10's creation. So they're the core standards timelines that we're tracking. I just want to talk a bit about Jakarta EE 9 and how we're approaching it. So Jakarta EE 9, the biggest change obviously is the namespace change from JAVX to Jakarta because of the migration to the Eclipse Foundation. So the way we're supporting this in 5, which is our current release, and you can do now, is that you can take an application in the Jakarta namespace and you can deploy that using the normal mechanism into Payara 5, which is a Jakarta EE 8 compatible application server. And what we do in your application is we transform your bytecode as you deploy and change it into the the JAVX namespace. Okay, we were hoping we'd be able to get full compatible implementation for that, but that's probably not going to be possible, simply because the TCK test suites do some string compares on class names, and obviously we're a Jakarta EE 8 runtime, so we don't have the right exception class names. But your application, and our goal is to make that fact that your application can run as you'd expect. So if you take a Jakarta 9 application, deploy it to Payara 5, we want to be able to run that without any change from your side. So feel free now to download Payara 5, check it out, and if you have hit any issues running the EE 9 application in Payara 5, then that is a bug, and we will try and fix it. So feel free to try. We do have EE 9 support. What we're going to do to actually get a compatible implementation and to get the badge, so to speak, is we're going to cut an alpha for Payara 6 which will basically be all built in the Jakarta namespace, and that will then get past the tests, the TCK, including the ones that do string compares of class names. So that's how we're going to get the compatibility badge, but it'll be based on Payara 5 code that we've just changed all the names to Jakarta. When we're going to 6, we're going to flip that around. So basically 6 will be a Jakarta E10 runtime. So it'll be in the Jakarta namespace. And our goal, though, is because everybody, the vast majority of people will still have Jakarta EE, Java EE8 applications, is what we will do is when you deploy them to 6, we'll do the same sort of transformation. We will transform them from the JavaX namespace into the Jakarta namespace and deploy them and run them. But our intention is when we go to 6 is that we'll support EE8 applications. So that, as I say, is available now. We aim to get a compatible alpha in time or very close to the Jakarta EE 9.1 release date, which is 25th of May. You should see that to download. But please try out Jakarta namespace applications in Payara 5. Okay, so then that's the core standards. What I want to go through is other areas that's coming on the way to 6 during the year, and where we are and what progress we've made on those. So we're splitting these into 2. We've got core improvements, which effectively is what would be in a single VM. So this is like the core runtime, like a Payara Micro or Payara Server single instance. So we've been working on CDI implementation. I've got a slide on that, so I'll talk about that. We haven't started on the servlet. We are looking to sort of integrate tracing and monitoring better when we come to 6. And one of the areas we want to improve as well is the EJB timer subsystems. And some of that may change in E10 anyway. So there's some work that we'll need to do around that. One thing I'm going to talk about is GRPC-based remoting. And I've got a slide about that. So that's in progress at the moment. So that is getting close to probably hitting a customer for testing out first, so they can, because they need it and they'll try it out, and then that'll hit community as well. So if we look at what we're doing on the CDI, so the reason we're looking at this is twofold. The first is Payara has a dependency injection framework in it already called HK2, which is the actual kernel of Payara. We've done some work on that, and HK2 itself is now passing the dependency injection TCKs, although I don't think we've done the sort of compatibility request to get the official badge yet. There's also work going on in EE10 about creating something called CDI Lite. So CDI Lite will form what's suggested that will be created for Jakarta E10, something called the core profile, which will be aimed at microservices type runtime. So it will have a very cut down subset of Jakarta E within it. And it will be focused around build time deployment or build time weaving, if you like. So which could support ahead of time compilation, but doesn't have to. So basically CDI Lite will cut out some of the more complicated bits that require deployment time, on the fly analysis, things like CDI extensions, and those things that need to look at every bean that's being created and mess about with it at deployment time. So CDI Lite is organized around creating that build time, so you can do everything you need to do in CDI at build time rather than deployment time. So because of that new specification, we're hoping that we can base that on HK2, and we can extend HK2 to support CDI Lite. And then on top of that will be CDI full, which will have the usual CDI extensions, decorators, and those other things that have to be created as proxies at runtime. The reason we're trying to do this is, one is because we use Weld, so therefore we have 2 dependency injection frameworks currently in Payara, and it'd be much more efficient to have a single one under sort of Eclipse Foundation as an open source project, which again would be competitor to Weld, but also because of CDI Lite. I don't think Weld will be supporting CDI Lite, given Red Hat have a different implementation for that. So that work's progressing. It will have to track along with CDI Lite and track along with the Jakarta E10. I want to talk about GRPC Remoting. So this is something that has been asked for by a few people, and which is basically first-class support for GRPC clients and server-side implementations. So we have our initial implementation. It's not in community yet. It's going to hit, I say, a customer to try it out to make sure it's doing what they want before we hit it into community. But the idea is that basically you'd be able to take your proto file, generate your gRPC service code, package that into your normal Jakarta EE WAR file with your server-side implementation, and that server-side implementation will be a CDI bean. So that once that's into CDI, then you can do all the things in your gRPC server that you can do in Jakarta EE. So you can inject DGBs, you can inject entity managers, you can use container managed transactions, you can use any of the standard APIs, because that's a big thing, because currently if you just take a gRPC service, drop it into something like Payara, then it's going to have its own HTTP ports, everything. It's just not really integrated at all, and you'd have to work out how you want to integrate that with the Jakarta EE side of things. So we have that done as a proof of concept, ready to be packaged up. The way that works is we've got a piece in the server, which is the orange piece, the gRPC integration, which is our code, and that ensures that if a request comes into Grizzly on the normal HTTP port, that is a gRPC request, that it gets routed to the correct server-side implementation. We then got some glue code that basically obviously does that routing, instantiates your server-side implementation, and then calls it with the right context for the right context so that you can inject and use any other Jakarta EE APIs. So the only thing you'd have to do was take what would normally be your gRPC thing, your gRPC server-side implementation, add an annotation to it, package up the normal gRPC generated, auto-generated service code, and that's done. You will then be exposed out to clients, and it will work over the normal Payara HTTP ports, and it obviously uses HTTP2, so you'll be able to do the usual gRPC send and receive clients. So that's coming very soon. So as I said, that's out with test at the moment with some customers, and we should have that very soon. The other features I wanted to look at are what we call platform features. So these are like span multiple JVMs, or provide multiple servers, or provide tooling for for domains and those things. So we've got a couple of things that I'll talk about now that we're working on, that we're on the roadmap. So we have what we call auto scale groups, and I'll go through that, Kubernetes Operator, and some migration tooling and upgrade tooling that we're working on at the moment. So this is the sort of complete concept of auto scaling. So this is, if you're taking, in that picture when I showed the continuum from like IoT devices with micros right through to Payara Cloud, then the auto scaling is something that will sit in Payara Server, so it supports the domain mode. So currently in Payara Server, if you create a deployment group, you create a set number of instances and you place them in a deployment group. And if you want another one, then you will go and create it through the administration console and add it to the deployment group manually. So what we're doing is we're building this out in feature by feature. Is we're basically providing the concept that a deployment group can have X number of instances in it, and DAS will start and stop or grow or shrink the deployment group based on some rules or based on some metrics. So that's the first thing, so you'll be able to go into the deployment group and say, I want 5 Payara instances, and it will create 5 Payara instances and grow the deployment group. And then you could shrink it down to 3, and it would do that for you. And it would spread those and place them across different compute. So where we can compute, obviously in a DAS currently you have what's called a node. It will be able to spread them across nodes, but we're also going to abstract. I mean, node is a good abstraction already, but we're going to abstract the node into different infrastructure providers. So obviously we have SSH nodes, so we can put it onto a physical server, but we'll have node structures for Docker like we have already, Kubernetes, potentially cloud APIs, those sort of things. So that if you, for example, for a cloud API, and is what we're working on at the minute, for example, if you're on Azure, you have a certain type of VM instance with a Payara on, then basically the DAS, you could go to the deployment group and say, I need 5, and it would go to Azure, create the servers, and create the instances and scale those out automatically. So that works ongoing. We should have, the first drop will include nodes, so as in basic SSH nodes, where the DAS will create a number of instances across whatever nodes you define. And then we'll also have Azure. And then later on, we'll build out different plugins for different compute providers. The key bit is we'll be creating an API that we can then just build different implementations of. Longer term, then we'll add scale rules to that. So you could use microprofile metrics, for instance, define a rule. The DAS would monitor that metric, and using your rules would grow or shrink your deployment group depending on what you'd set. Then finally, the bit will be to hook up an ingress API so we can talk to a load balancer or an Kubernetes ingress or something like that to make sure that all instances are load balanced correctly. So that piece of work is ongoing, and first drops will start coming into community in the next few months.
Hi, Steve. We just had a question from Jan Nielsen. He asks, are Payara's code base moving away from Glassfish and are becoming a different product?
Payara's code base moved away from Glassfish back in 2016. So interesting question. So Eclipse Glassfish, we're not based on Eclipse Glassfish for various reasons. We are project members of Eclipse Glassfish, but we don't actually use Eclipse Glassfish code. The reason is we forked from Oracle Glassfish server. So the license between Eclipse Glassfish and Oracle Glassfish are different. So we are still on, well, we're on Payara code now, but it was originally forked back in 2016. So yes, we are moving away, but we're not moving away from compatibility, if you see what I mean. Our code base is different. So these things won't go back into Eclipse Glassfish because we're not based on Eclipse Glassfish. Okay.
Yep.
The other thing that's coming very soon is a Kubernetes operator. So again, you only need the operator when you're talking about Payara server, because Payara Micro on the left-hand side of that previous slide is basically a single VM product. So you can wrap it up into a container and run it on Kubernetes without anything special. It doesn't need any special configuration, and it can cluster and do those things as long as you get your service names right. And has a Kubernetes clustering API to find each other. So it can cluster and things, but it doesn't need an operator. So Kubernetes operator is like a automated administrator that sits in your in your Kubernetes infrastructure, or Kubernetes instance. And what the Payara operator we're producing does is it effectively will automatically configure out a Payara server domain with a deployment group, which will be clustered with a number of instances in it. So onto a Kubernetes infrastructure. So what you would do is you would basically write a CRD file which defines how you want your cluster to look, your Payara domain to look. And our operator will sit there looking for files. When the file comes in, it will then go and provision a domain in the way that you have defined, and we'll be setting up lots of sort of hooks to define domains in different ways. And so the Payara operator does all the infrastructure and Kubernetes fiddling that you need to happen to set up a proper Payara domain with deployment group cluster into a Kubernetes infrastructure. So it will talk to the API, it will sort out the ingress, it will talk to the other Kubernetes capabilities that are there. And again, that's coming in part of our vision to make sure that you don't have to worry about infrastructure. We worry about how we set all these things up for you and how we use the infrastructure to run your Jakarta EE application. So the Kubernetes operator sort of sits on the right-hand side of that continuum, whereby we're providing that capability to set up and run the domain on Kubernetes. So it basically will automate what you can do that now, but it takes a little bit of manual setup, and you could choose to do that, but the operator automates that manual setup. And you know, as time goes on, we can improve operator based on people's desires and needs and feature requests to do other things. It basically sits outside of the domain and can operate on changes. The auto scale will also sort of run as we build it out. We'll run on top of Kubernetes. We'll have a sort of different mindset. I mean, the operators, for those who sort of know Kubernetes and want to work in a Kubernetes way. The auto scale group will be for people who don't really care about Kubernetes and they want Payara to scale out without caring about Kubernetes. So you would set your scale rules in the DAS, and it would deal with Kubernetes and creating pods and scaling it out that way. So it depends on, we're trying to support both mindsets. If you want to come from a Kubernetes world, we'll have the operator. If you just want to come from a Payara world, we'll make sure that the DAS can run on top of Kubernetes and can start and stop instances on top of Kubernetes. Okay. We've also shipped the upgrade tool that was on the roadmap. So this is in enterprise, and it ensures that you can upgrade and downgrade from one version of enterprise to the next with a single command line, single command. So it can upgrade, it can revert back. You can take a local distribution of Payara and upgrade that from the zip file and do that in place. So that's one of the features that's been asked for a lot by people, and that's been shipped in the past few months. Okay, finally, I want to talk about Payara Cloud very briefly. Again, this is the sort of far right-hand side on my continuum of compute infrastructure. So Payara Cloud initially will be shipped as a platform as a service that we will host and run. The long-term goal for larger organizations who obviously don't want Payara to run their infrastructure and would want to deploy within their cloud is that it'll become a deployable application that sits on top of Kubernetes. So currently, what the goal of Payara Cloud is really to go to the extreme, allow you to just to take your application that is written in Jakarta EE and give it to the Payara Cloud PaaS, and it will deploy it and run it on the public cloud without you having to worry about any of the infrastructure needs that are there. So what it does is it basically will sit and it will provision compute for you, so you can specify how many CPU cores and how much memory you want, and it will provision and build and create a number of instances out on public cloud. So the interface will be completely different. This isn't just, say, Payara Server on top of Kubernetes on top of AKS that you'd have to set up all yourself. This is basically a fundamentally different interface. So basically, you will sign up for an account. You will, once you log in, you'll be able to see your applications. You get metrics about what's happening, and then you can basically deploy just upload a new WAR file, and we will deploy it as if you were just deploying a normal application to an application server. We will basically inspect contents of your WAR file as the runtime, and we will provision the infrastructure to run your application. So that includes, all the sorry, there's a big noise outside. All the Docker infrastructure, all the ingress, all the networking, all the clustering, all the pods definitions, all that stuff gets happened by Payara Cloud, and you basically will deploy, get a URL, access your application, and it's done running. So the timeline for that is we've done a beta. We've had feedback from people on the closed beta, which is getting fed into the application. If anyone wants demos or wants access to closed betas, it can be arranged. Ultimately, end of summer 2021, probably September time, we will open this up, and that anybody will be able to sign up for an account and use it. It'll probably officially be in beta, but it'll work, and it'll be already using that cloud style of release the service in beta first, but it'll be there. And then autumn we'll improve, build out more zones and build out more regions and things as on demand. And Payara Cloud will be ready at the end of this year. So that's it. Just wanted to reiterate basically that our goal really as a company is to be first for Jakarta EE. We want to build our platform to support all the different types of infrastructure that you have to support, to have the latest APIs so that you can just concentrate on building your application and let us worry about how we run your application. So thank you.
Awesome.
Any questions, Jaden?
Yes, we have one already. So if anyone else has any questions, please feel free to put in the chat or the Q&A section. Volker, and this is going back to the Glassfish sort of conversation. He says, you said those things you talked about are not going back in Glassfish, but is the reverse also true? Can you still merge new features or additions in Glassfish back to Payara?
So yes, because the Payara team are still members of the Glassfish project. So I'm currently project lead of the Glassfish project. So I've been driving Glassfish to Jakarta EE 9.1. So if anything happens in Glassfish that we like in Payara, then it's open source. We can start and implement those things there. So that's not a problem. I don't know what the Glassfish roadmap is. So I don't know what new features will appear in Glassfish. Glassfish typically in its current position is effectively used to make sure that we can take Jakarta EE to ballot and to make sure that we can release a Jakarta EE specification, because Glassfish currently, except maybe Payara too, implements all the optional features of Jakarta EE, and you have to basically have something implementation that implements all optional features, and currently that's Glassfish. Beyond that, the project isn't really doing anything else.
Okay. Josh Genuo asks, any information available on Payara Cloud costing? This is the
costing, did you say?
Yes.
No, but it will be soon. No, because we haven't decided what it's going to cost yet. But we're looking, it will be costed on a shape. So I could say this may not happen, so take this with caution. But currently it will be costed on a shape. So you will choose how many vCPUs, how much memory you want, and the cost will be metered based on that. So very much a PaaS type model. And the costs will be similar to other PaaS, as I imagine. But I couldn't tell you the exact costs, but that's the form that it will take. I mean, we're aiming for people. I mean, the reason we're doing our own hosting initially is we're aiming for people that want to run 1 node, 2 node, 3 node sort of Java Jakarta EE applications, but don't want to have all the hassle of running and managing and building all that infrastructure themselves on top of the cloud. also, it's providing us with a way of, again, taking that Jakarta model of deployment and seeing how that looks in the cloud platform. So I'd say we will eventually create an installable version at some point.
Okay. Yen asks, we have previously talked about replacing Corba. Is GRPC the new protocol?
No. So GRPC is there to support people who want to use GRPC. So our GRPC we're shipping will be effectively, you will deploy a GRPC service and it will allow you to call it from Payara. It's not going to just expose EJBs over GRPC protocol or something like that. So Corba will be still there in 6. It's there in 5 for remote EJBs, along with our current HTTP support, which is more limited for EJB calling. So
yeah, also asks, are the servers for cloud placed in Europe? And he asks GDPR, data shield, ...
So well, basically we'll have, it's multi-region, so you'll be able to choose. From a GDPR perspective, if that concerns you, Payara Cloud will be ran outside from our Portuguese company. So it will be GDPR compliant and within scope of GDPR, because it'll be run from the European entity. So initially you'll be able to choose European regions, but you'll also be able to choose regions probably in the US in the first instance. But it's built to be multi-region, so we can have it in different regions based on wherever the cloud provider has regions.
Okay. Justin who asks, will the open beta, this is for Payara Cloud, be available for testing and use in presentations, etc.?
Should be able to, yes.
Well,
don't think we have
got a few more questions.
Restrictions. Go on. Yeah, I can see them.
Martin Graney, he asks, will the upgrade tool become available in the Payara Community Edition?
The answer is that would be no. I mean, it's an enterprise-only feature. The reason why it won't be available there is because community is fast moving, and the community team actually don't do work to work out whether something can be upgraded from one version of community to the next. We have a separate enterprise team, and their job is to make sure that the upgrade tool can support enterprise from one version of enterprise to the next version of enterprise. That's the main reason.
Okay. Carlos asks, just curious about the HK2 move to replace Weld. When should we expect it to be available, Payara 5 or 6?
It will be 6 because Jakarta EE 10 will hopefully have core profile and CDI Lite. It may, I'm not saying promising, but it may appear in 5 community. It depends how disruptive that changes, or it may come as an option in 5, but that's not been decided because it's not finished yet. But it'll definitely, the aim will be to have it in 6 if core profile hits the 6 timeline and hits Jakarta EE 10 timeline.
Volker has another 2 questions. Says Payara Micro can run without unpacking its jars to a TMP folder. Payara Micro always unpacks the jars to a -TMP.
Yeah, I've got it. I can read it.
This is problematic. Will Payara Micro also get an option to run from memory only without unpacking the jar?
So Payara Micro already has an option where you can run it without unpacking the jar. Unfortunately, I can't remember the command line switch. It basically runs from within the jar. It doesn't unpack it. And it starts and uses an internal class loader, which will load from the internal jars from current Payara Micro jar. So there is an option, and I can't remember the command line.
Okay.
If anyone in this chat they can put it in the chat.
Is this something in the documentation?
It is in the documentation, and if you do minus help, it'll tell you the command lines. So.
Okay. Volker, next question was the new CDI you talked about, is that already open source? Can I try it already? I looked at several Payara HK2 repos, but can't find anything.
So the changes that will be open source. Some of the work hasn't started yet. The first step was, as I said on the slide, was to get it passing the dependency injection TCK. That work is getting and will continue to be done, we hope, in the upstream Eclipse Glassfish HK2 project. So the initial bit is, I think the changes have been, there's a PR to make the changes to make it past the dependency injection TCK. As I said, the work will happen in Glassfish HK2 repo, not in the Payara repos, because that will be probably common between the two servers.
Cool. And last one currently, Martin asks, if you will have Payara cloud servers in the US, will you look at becoming FIPS 2 compliant? I ask because my company develops applications for government entities.
We can do. I think, it won't ship initially as FIPS 2 compliant, but I think it's something we do need to look at once we start looking the US region and see if it could work also in sort of GovCloud or something like that as well. But we've not investigated that yet, but I think it's a good question and something we need to take on board.
Oh, Rudy has responded with the docs link. Thank you very much, Rudy. And that is all our questions, I believe.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, everyone. Any further questions, you can always message us on social, on Twitter, or through our website. Send us an email, and we'll do our best to get back to you. Yeah,
and I say any feature requests or anything like that, we're always keen either on the forums or on GitHub to get those, because building product roadmaps, we do like to get feedback on what people want and whether they use features and those things, because at the end of the day, we're building software tools for you rather than for ourselves. So.
And also, along with the Reef, with the slide Steve is showing, if you belong to a company and you're interested in doing a collaboration, in writing some stuff, doing webinars, anything like that, we're open to that. Currently, we've got 4 or 5 in the works, and I'm always looking for more things to do. We really like interacting with our community and similar companies that have similar values.
Yeah, just a comment on that as well. If you're doing jugs and things and you need people to talk about Jakarta E10 or microprofile and what's happening, then we're always keen on that as well, because obviously Jakarta E10 is starting to move, so we can start doing presentations about what the features are, what's coming, those things. So if you need any of those, just let us know at companies or jugs or whatever.
Cool. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.
Cheers. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.